Have you ever stopped to think about how healthy your mind really is? Not in clinical terms, but in the subtleties of daily life, the silent reactions, the thoughts you hide even from yourself. What if the true measure of our emotional health lies in the questions we avoid asking? Evaluating our emotional wounds can be painful, but it's also necessary. It's like turning on the light in a basement we've avoided for years, and there are at least 4 fundamental pillars that support this internal structure, starting with the most essential and paradoxically one of the most forgotten: self-love. It's easy to mistake self-love for vanity, self-promotion, or small acts of self-care. But the truth is that genuine self-love is one of the deepest forms of emotional maturity. It's not measured by how often we praise ourselves, but by the courage to stay loyal to who we are when no one else is. Loving yourself is being your own home when the world turns to exile. It's knowing that even when everything around you collapses, there's a ground within you that does not give way. Loving yourself is the quiet but firm refusal to believe that we only have worth if we are better, more attractive, more successful, more likable. It is holding on to our dignity even in the presence of someone else's glow, without letting it dim our own light, because there will always be someone more admired, more loved, more celebrated. And that's okay. Self-love doesn't decrumble in the face of comparison. It flourishes when we understand that our worth doesn't need to compete in order to exist. But it's not always like that. How many times have we felt smaller just by standing next to someone else? How often does another person's presence brutally reveal how small we still feel inside? And when we're rejected, ignored, dismissed, sometimes through harsh words, other times through cutting silences, can we still remember that we are not a reflection of how we retreated, but of what we know about ourselves? Or do we let each gesture of disdain become a sentence against our very existence? There's a pain more dangerous than any direct aggression, the pain of believing we deserve less. In relationships, this shows up as staying where we're hurt. We accept emotional scraps, justify abuse, settle for less, because somewhere deep inside, someone convinced us that this is the best we can get. As if true affection were a luxury reserved for others, never for us. And when we make mistakes, do we have enough compassion to forgive ourselves? Or does every failure reopen old wounds, throwing us back into a familiar narrative of not being enough? The absence of self-love turns us into merciless judges of ourselves. A small stumble becomes proof that we are a mistake in our entirety. As if one moment could define who we are, erasing everything else. Even our desires, those that arise from our deepest core, can become a source of shame. Instead of looking at them with curiosity, with humanity, we look at them with guilt, as if feeling were a sin, as if wanting were wrong. But don't our most intimate impulses deserve, before any judgment, a careful listening, a gesture of welcoming? In the workplace, this wound shows up more subtly, but no less destructively. The absence of self-love hides behind forced smiles, quiet overtime, goals achieved at the cost of emotional health. We overwork, settle for less, fear speaking up, because deep down, we still believe our worth needs to be proven. And little by little, we drain ourselves, as if trading our dignity for small doses of approval. Saying no in these situations feels almost like rebellion. The need to please turns us into hostages. We're always available, always polite, always helpful, even when everything inside us is screaming for boundaries. And by the time we notice, we no longer know where others end and where we begin. Self-love, in the end, is the art of not abandoning yourself. It is the courage to stay with yourself on the good days, and especially on the days when everything hurts. It's the commitment to build a relationship with yourself so solid, so intimate, that no rejection from the world could ever destroy you completely. The second pillar of this inner journey is honesty, perhaps one of the hardest and yet most liberating virtues we can cultivate. It's the courage not just to look in the mirror, but to hold our own gaze when it lands on something we'd rather not see. It's not about the reflection in the glass, but the invisible mirror we carry inside, the mirror of the soul, where our contradictions live, hidden desires, unspoken resentments, carefully disguised vulnerabilities. How much truth can we really handle about who we are? Do we have the courage to admit that we are beings in conflict, sometimes guided by impulses that embarrass us, that we live with doubt even when we try to appear certain? That there is genuine kindness within us, yes, but also shadow, pride, jealousy, and a secret longing to be admired, accepted, even feared. Honesty calls us to a kind of humility that is not self-punishment, but maturity. It's recognizing that feeling envy doesn't make us monsters, just human. That feeling anger doesn't make us bad people. It simply reveals wounds still unhealed. That fear is not weakness, but a survival alarm from a part of us trying to protect itself. The problem was never feeling. The problem is pretending not to feel, while our unacknowledged emotions seep into our choices, distort our relationships, and sabotage our paths. Without honesty, we become prisoners of the image we try to maintain. We live tired, exhausted from pretending, and increasingly distant from who we really are. Because you can't be free from what you don't have the courage to face. What we don't name controls us from the shadows. True transformation only begins when we stop fighting who we are and start looking inward with honesty. When we're able to say, yes, this lives in me too, and it's not pretty, but it's real. And because it's real, I can work with it. Honesty doesn't destroy, it rebuilds. It allows us to leave the prison of denial and walk, even if slowly, toward wholeness. And what about when the truth comes from someone else? When a criticism arises, fair or not, how do we react? Can we hear it with discernment? Or does each word open up old wounds, trigger childhood memories, activate unresolved fears of being inadequate, unworthy, or abandoned? Often it's not the criticism itself that hurts, but everything it silently awakens within us. The honesty we practice with ourselves must overflow into our conversations. Emotional maturity means accepting that truth doesn't always come wrapped in kindness. Sometimes it arrives as confrontation, silence, or pain. And yet it may still carry wisdom. Are we willing to listen, even when it hurts? Or do we demand that the world shield us from reality, as if it were someone else's job to protect our fragility? Honesty also means allowing others to be imperfect, just as contradictory, confused, and human as we are. It's about letting go of the idealized version of the world and people so we can finally begin to understand them. And when this mutual acceptance happens, something precious is revealed. Freedom, because the more truth we can bear, our own and that of others, the less we need to run. The less afraid we become of living, of loving, of trying, of failing, of simply being. And perhaps it's in that raw, imperfect but honest space that we finally begin to feel whole. Which leads us to the third pillar of this emotional journey, communication, the difficult and essential art of transforming internal chaos into understandable bridges between us and others. When something hurts us, do we have the emotional resources to shape that pain into words? Can we name what we feel without turning the other into a villain, without exaggerating or minimizing it? Or do we swallow it all in silence, clinging to the fantasy that someone, out of love, sensitivity, or duty, will guess what's going on inside us? The truth is, many of us learned too early that talking about what hurts can be dangerous. Maybe no one listened. Maybe our feelings were mocked. Maybe every time we tried to express ourselves, we were met with absence or punishment. So we developed a kind of self-silencing. We feel everything but say nothing. And expecting others to understand what was never said is a recipe for silent resentment. the kind that corrodes relationships slowly, without noise, but with depth. In moments of frustration, how do we react? Do we explode in gestures, slam doors, icy silences, cutting glances, because we don't know how to turn the internal storm into coherent sentences? Or can we, even through tears, clearly say, "That hurt me, and I wish you understood why"? And if we're not understood on the first try, can we take a deep breath, adjust our approach, try again, with more empathy, more listening, more patience? Or do we shut down, convinced it's not worth it, that no one will ever truly understand us, feeding the loneliness, born from what is never spoken? To communicate is more than to speak. It's an act of emotional translation. It's the attempt, often imperfect, to let someone else see the world through our eyes, even if just for a moment. It's offering access to our inner universe, without violence, without demand, but with truth. And that requires maturity. It requires understanding that sometimes others will fail to understand us. And that doesn't mean they don't care. It means recognizing that not every listening failure is neglect. Sometimes it's just the distance between two stories that still need to learn how to meet. Communication is also teaching. It's showing the other how to deal with us, how to love us, how to comfort us, instead of expecting them to figure it out on their own. It's creating space for dialogue, even when we're hurting, even when silence would be easier. Because every time we manage to speak our pain without causing harm, and to hear discomfort without running away, we're building something greater than immediate relief. We're cultivating real connection. And perhaps the most important of all, communication is an act of self-love. It's telling the world, I matter enough for my pain to be spoken, my joy shared, my silence broken, my story told. And it's cheese when we start to allow ourselves this kind of authentic expression, even if imperfect, even if shaky, that we discover something powerful. That being understood begins with the courageous act of revealing ourselves. And then we arrive at the fourth and perhaps quietest of the pillars. Trust. Not trust in others, but the most fundamental trust of all. Trust in life. How safe do we feel in the world? How much do we truly believe we can handle the unpredictability of existence? A criticism, an unexpected no, a financial setback, a mild illness, a sudden change. Do these things feel like part of a natural process, or do they instantly become threats of collapse? Perhaps without realizing it, we live constantly assessing the risks around us. We ask ourselves, with or without words, am I one step away from disaster? The smallest setback can feel like the beginning of catastrophe. And that says more about what we carry inside than about the world itself. In relationships, for instance, fear disguises itself as attachment. We feel the need to hold on too tightly, to control every detail, as if any space, any distance were a sign of abandonment. But does love require constant surveillance, or freedom to breathe? Are we capable of letting someone go without the certainty they'll return? Can we start something new with someone interesting, even knowing we might not be loved back? Or do we isolate ourselves to avoid any possibility of pain? And if a chapter ends, do we have the strength to turn the page and move on? Or do we get stuck, repeating the same stories out of fear of throwing ourselves into the unknown? The big question behind all these situations is the world to us a livable place or a minefield? Do we believe there's space to be ourselves, with our flaws, our scars, our uniqueness? Or do we feel that living is just about adapting, hiding, protecting ourselves? Trust is more than an act of faith. It's a direct reflection of how we were received in the past, of whether we were taught or not, that making mistakes isn't the end, that rejection doesn't mean we're worthless, that pain may come, but it can also pass. And no, it's not our fault. if we struggle today to respond positively to these questions. Our insecurities have deep roots, often planted in childhood moments we can barely remember. But by asking ourselves these questions with courage, we take a giant step. We start to map the wounds. We begin to understand what kind of pain we carry, and most importantly, what kind of healing we still need to seek. Recognizing these vulnerabilities doesn't weaken us. It sets us free, because only when we know where it hurts can we finally begin to care for it. If this video made you reflect, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, comment which of the pillars touched you the most, and share it with someone you love. See you in the next video. Take care.